I am standing at the gate with a one-way boarding pass and zero goodbyes. Yesterday, I reserved 4 seats at my graduation, and my family left every single one of them empty to throw a Super Bowl party. They thought I was just the invisible daughter who would quietly accept the neglect. They did not know about the sealed envelope burning a hole in my pocket, or that I was finally done funding their lies with my silence. My name is Avery Lewis, and for the last 23 years, I have been the person who stays. I stayed quiet when my brother got the new cleats, and I got the hand-me-down textbooks. I stayed patient when family dinners turned into strategy sessions for his athletic career. I stayed hopeful, foolishly and stubbornly hopeful, that if I just achieved enough, if I just worked hard enough, if I just made myself easy enough to love, my parents would finally look at me and see something other than a background character in the movie of their lives. But I am not staying anymore. I am standing at Gate B12 at the International Terminal, watching the sun bleed over the gray tarmac. It is 5 in the morning on a Monday, the kind of hour that feels like a secret, existing between the late-night desperation of the red-eye travelers and the manic energy of the morning business commuters. My hands are wrapped around a paper coffee cup that went cold 20 minutes ago, but I don't throw it away because I need something to hold. If I let go, I'm afraid my hands will start shaking, and if they start shaking, I might not stop until I shatter. In my other hand, clutching it so tight the edges are starting to dampen with sweat, is a boarding pass. It is a one-way ticket. There is no return date printed on the paper. There is no family standing on the other side of the security checkpoint, waving tearful goodbyes. There is no group photo being snapped for Facebook to prove that we are a happy, cohesive unit sending their daughter off into the great wide world. There is just me, a single carry-on bag containing 3 pairs of jeans and a laptop, and the deafening silence where my family should be. The airport is quiet, a low hum of rolling suitcases and muffled announcements, but inside my head, it is deafeningly loud. I close my eyes, and instantly, I am back in the stadium yesterday. I am back in the heat and the noise and the humiliating crush of realization. It was graduation day. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only yesterday afternoon. The stadium was a bowl of noise, a chaotic symphony of air horns, screaming parents, and the heavy, rhythmic thumping of the university band playing the same march on a loop. The air smelled like cheap polyester gowns and sunscreen. Thousands of students sat in the center of the field, a sea of black caps, shifting restlessly in the humidity. I remember the feeling of the gown against my neck. It was itchy, heavy, a tangible weight of 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at the coffee shop, and essays written at 3 in the morning while my roommates slept. I had earned this, every single thread of that gown. I had paid for every credit hour, every textbook, every late fee. I had handled it, and I had asked for one thing. Just one thing. I looked up at the stands. I knew exactly where to look. I had spent $200 of my own money I had saved from tips over the last 3 months, to buy 4 specific tickets, Section 104, Row G, seats 1 through 4. They were good seats. They were close enough that you could see the faces of the graduates without needing binoculars. They were in the shade, because I knew my mother hated the direct sun, and they were on the aisle, because I knew my father hated feeling trapped in the middle of a row. I had mailed the tickets home 2 months ago. I had texted the confirmation numbers. I had sent a map of the parking lot. I had done everything short of driving home and physically dragging them into the car. When the ceremony started, I scanned the crowd. I saw my roommate's parents waving a giant cardboard cutout of her face, screaming her name so loud she turned bright pink. I saw the guy who sat next to me in chemistry hugging his little sister over the railing. I saw families that had driven 10 hours, families that had flown in from other countries, families that were squeezed together on the bleachers, sweating and uncomfortable and radiating pure, unadulterated pride. And then I found Section 104. I counted the rows up. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I counted the seats in 1, 2, 3, 4, Empty. They were not just empty, they were conspicuously empty. In a stadium packed to capacity, where people were standing in the aisles and sitting on the concrete steps, those 4 blue plastic seats were a gaping wound. I had put little reserved signs on them, just in case they were running late. I could see the white paper of the signs fluttering slightly in the breeze. No one was sitting there. No one was coming. I remember the dean of the college walking to the podium. He started talking about the future, about how we were the leaders of tomorrow, about the sanctity of the support systems that had gotten us here. He asked the graduates to stand and applaud the parents and guardians who had sacrificed to make this day possible. Around me, 3,000 students stood up. The sound of applause was like thunder. It vibrated in my chest. I stood up too, because I didn't want to be the only one sitting. But my hands hung limp at my sides. I looked at those 4 empty seats, and I felt something inside me fracture. It wasn't a break. It was a silent, clean snap. I sat back down as the names started to be called. A, B, C. It would take a while to get to Lewis. I pulled my phone out of the hidden pocket under my gown. I told myself I was checking the time. I told myself I was checking to see if maybe there was a text message. A frantic apology about a flat tire or a traffic jam or a medical emergency. I would have taken a medical emergency. God help me. I would have been relieved if someone had texted me that they were in the hospital, because at least that would have been a reason. There were no texts, no missed calls, but there was a notification from Instagram. My thumb hovered over the icon. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew. With the instinct of an animal sensing a trap, that opening that app was going to hurt. But I did it anyway. The first story in the feed was my mother's. It had been posted 12 minutes ago. I tapped the screen. The video filled my phone, bright and loud and high definition. It wasn't a hospital room. It wasn't the side of a highway with a flat tire. It was our backyard. The camera panned across the deck, which was decked out in green and silver balloons. There was a giant banner strung up between the oak trees that read, Super Bowl Sunday, in massive block letters. There were streamers. There was a caterer setting up trays of wings and sliders. There were coolers packed with ice and beer. And there were people, dozens of them, neighbors, friends of the family, my father's business partners, and seemingly every single person my brother had ever played football with. Then the camera landed on them. My father was wearing his lucky jersey, holding a beer, throwing his head back in laughter at something a neighbor said. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He didn't look like a man who was missing his daughter's college graduation. He looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. My mother waved at the camera, holding a platter of dip. "Party is starting," she chirped, her voice tinny through the phone speakers. "Everyone get here before kickoff." And then there was Colt, my brother, the golden boy. He was sitting on the cooler, the center of attention as always, holding court with a group of guys. He looked like the future. He looked like the investment that had paid off. I watched the video 3 times. I watched it while the names were being called. Adams, Baker, Carter. I watched my parents clinking bottles. I watched them smiling. I watched them celebrating a football game that they weren't even playing in, hosting a party for a son who hadn't graduated from anything that day. While I sat 3 hours away in a polyester gown, staring at 4 empty blue seats, I turned off the phone. I put it back in my pocket. When they called Avery Lewis, I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand. I took the diploma. I smiled for the official photographer, but I know that when the proofs come back, my eyes will look dead. I didn't look at the audience. I didn't need to. I knew what wasn't there. Now, sitting in this airport terminal, I looked down at my carry-on bag. I didn't leave because I hated them. Hate is a hot, fiery emotion. Hate implies passion. Hate implies that you are still engaged, still fighting, still trying to prove them wrong. I left because I finally understood what I was to them. I wasn't a daughter. I was an option. I was the backup plan. I was the person who was expected to understand, to accommodate, to be low maintenance. I was the person they could skip for a football game because they assumed I would be there when the game was over. They assumed I would always be there, waiting for the scraps of their attention, grateful for whatever crumbs they brushed off the table after Colt had eaten his fill. They were wrong. I pressed my hand against my side, feeling the outline of the envelope tucked into the inner pocket of my jacket. I haven't let it out of my sight since Dr. Marrow gave it to me. I remember her face when she handed it to me in her office, the way the late afternoon sun caught the dust motes dancing in the air between us. Dr. Marrow was the head of the department, a woman who terrified half the faculty and inspired the other half. She didn't do warm and fuzzy. She didn't do favors. "Do not open this until after the ceremony," she had said, her voice low, intense. "Promise me." "Avery," I had promised. I thought it was a scholarship letter. I thought it was maybe a recommendation for a job, or perhaps a small grant she had secured for me. I didn't realize it was a fuse. I didn't realize that the piece of paper inside that envelope was going to do more than just change my career. It was going to burn my entire family dynamic to the ground. Because as I sit here, watching the sun finally break over the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, I know something that my parents don't know. They didn't just skip my graduation. They didn't just choose a party over me. They were hiding something. I replay the last 4 years in my head. The times my financial aid paperwork went missing. The times my mother changed the subject whenever I asked about the savings bonds my grandfather had left me. The way my father got defensive whenever I asked about credit scores or bank statements. I used to think they were just disorganized. I used to think they were just focused on Colt's expensive training camps and travel teams, and that the money was just tight. But the envelope in my pocket, and the phone call I had with my grandmother 3 hours ago, told a different story. My grandmother, Nora, the only person who had tried to come, the only person who had called me, sobbing, from a traffic jam on the interstate, devastated that she was going to miss my name being called. She was the one who forced it all into the open. She was the one who told me to stop looking for love in a dry well and start looking at the ledger. The turning point of my life wasn't the empty seats. The empty seats were just the symptom. The turning point was what I found when I finally stopped making excuses for them and started looking at the evidence. My parents are waking up right now. They are probably nursing hangovers from the Super Bowl party. They are probably cleaning up red Solo cups and leftover wings. They might be checking their phones, expecting a text from me. They probably expect a text that says, "It's okay, I understand. Hope the party was fun." They are expecting the Avery who apologizes for taking up space. They have no idea that Avery is gone. They have no idea that in about 45 minutes, I am going to board a plane that will take me 4,000 miles away from them. And they have no idea that when I land, the first thing I'm going to do is not call them. The first thing I'm going to do is file the paperwork that my grandmother gave me. But before I get on that plane, before I close this chapter and light the match that will incinerate the bridge back home, I need to understand how I got here. I need to understand how a family rots from the inside out, so slowly that you don't even notice the smell until the floor gives way beneath you. It didn't start with the graduation. It didn't start with the Super Bowl. It started with a phone call. Let me take you back to the phone call that finally snapped the last thread. 6 weeks ago, when I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, foolish enough to believe that if I just asked nicely, they would finally show up. 6 weeks before the ceremony, the air in my apartment felt thin, like it was running out of oxygen. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, my back pressed against the peeling paint of the wall. My knees pulled up to my chest. My phone lay on the carpet in front of me. The screen dark, reflecting the water stain on the ceiling. I was 23 years old. I was about to graduate with honors, and I was terrified to make a phone call. I had rehearsed the sentence in the shower. I had whispered it while making toast. I had said it out loud to the empty passenger seat of my car while driving to my morning shift. "Hey, Mom, Dad, just checking you have the date for graduation." It means a lot to me. It sounds simple. To anyone with a normal family. It sounds like a notification, not a request. But in the Lewis household, nothing involving me was ever a notification. It was always a negotiation. And usually, I was the one paying the price to keep the peace. I picked up the phone. My hands were cold. I took a breath that rattled slightly in my lungs and tapped the contact labeled home. It rang 3 times. Hello? My mother's voice was distracted, breathless, like I had interrupted her in the middle of a marathon. Hey, Mom, I said, forcing my voice into a register that sounded breezy and unbothered. It's Avery. Oh, Avery, she said. The breathlessness vanished, replaced by a flat, vaguely pleasant tone she used for telemarketers and neighbors she didn't particularly like. Everything okay? We're a little busy right now. In the background, I could hear it, the wall of sound. It was the specific, aggressive roar of sports talk radio. 2 men shouting statistics at each other, layered over the booming volume of the living room television. My father must have been sitting in his recliner, the remote control guarded like a scepter. The noise was so loud it felt like physical static coming through the phone line, a barrier built specifically to keep me out. I'm fine, I said, talking louder to be heard over the pundits screaming about quarterback ratings. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to double-check the dates with you. For graduation. There was a pause. It wasn't a silence, because the TV was still blaring, but the quality of my mother's presence on the line shifted. It became tight. Graduation, she repeated. She said the word like it was a foreign concept she was trying to translate. Yes, May 17th, I said. The ceremony starts at 1 in the afternoon. I sent you the email with the details last month, but I wanted to make sure you booked the hotel if you plan on staying over, or if you were just going to drive up for the day. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear her shifting the phone from one ear to the other. I could hear the distinct sound of silverware clinking, which meant she was probably polishing the good forks or setting the table for dinner. May 17th, she said slowly. Avery, honey, that's a Sunday. I know, I said. Most graduations are on weekends. Right, she said, drawing the word out. But that is not just any Sunday. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. I knew the calendar. I knew exactly what day it was. But I had hoped, with a desperation that made me feel pathetic, that maybe this once, the calendar of my life would take precedence over the calendar of the National Football League. It's May 17th, she said. Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was factual. It was the tone you use when someone asks for ice cream, but the freezer is broken. It is just not possible. I know it is the Super Bowl, I said, keeping my voice steady, but the game doesn't start until 6:30 in the evening. My ceremony is at 1. It will be over by 3. You could drive up, watch me walk, and be back home with plenty of time before kickoff. It is only an hour drive. Dale, my mother shouted away from the phone. The volume of her voice made me flinch. Dale, turn that down. It is Avery. She is talking about that graduation thing. The background noise dipped slightly, but not enough. Then there was a rustling sound, the fumble of a handoff, and my father's breathing filled my ear. Avery? Hi, Dad, I said. What is this about the 17th? He asked. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He went straight to the logistics, his voice gruff with the annoyance of a man interrupted during his relaxation time. Graduation, I said again. I felt like I was begging. I was telling Mom that the ceremony is early. You guys can make it and still be back for the game. We already planned the party. Avery, my father said. He spoke with the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. We have 40 people coming over. The invites went out 2 weeks ago. We rented the big screen. We ordered the kegs. I know, I said, my fingernails digging into the carpet fibers. But you don't have to be there all day setting up, do you? Can't you just come for the 2 hours? Just to see me walk? It is not just a party, my father said, his voice rising in irritation. It is for Colt. You know how important this season is for him. He has been training his tail off. We have got a scout coming, a friend of a friend, big connection with the university program. He is coming to the party to watch the game. If he sees a good environment, a supportive family, it helps Colt. Colt needs this. Colt. There it was. The name that functioned as the sun in our family's solar system. Blinding and consuming everything in its orbit. Colt was 19. He was a quarterback. He was the golden child. The investment. The future. I was the past. The daughter who got good grades but didn't throw a ball. The one who worked quietly while the fanfare played for someone else. Dad, I said, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. I am graduating from college. Summa cum laude. That is a big deal. 2. Colt has a game every week. This is once. Don't be jealous, Avery. My mother's voice came back on the line. She must have been listening on the extension. Or maybe my father had put me on speaker so they could present a united front. It is not becoming. You know how hard your brother works. I work hard too, I whispered. Of course you do, she said, her voice dripping with that practiced, suffocating sweetness. And we are proud of you, but we can't be in 2 places at once. We have guests arriving at 3. The caterers are coming at 2. We can't leave the house unattended. The ceremony is at 1, I said. If you left at noon, you would be there. You could leave right after I walk. You would be back by 4. The guests won't even be there yet. It is too tight, my father said. Too much stress. I don't want to be rushing around on the highway on May 17th. Traffic will be a nightmare. So you are just not coming? I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and bruised. We will celebrate later, my mother said quickly, rushing to fill the silence before the guilt could settle in. We will do a nice dinner, just the family, maybe the week after, or the week after that, when things settle down with Colt's training schedule. But I want you there then, I said. I reserved seats, 4 of them. I paid for them. You shouldn't have spent your money without asking us, my father said. Turning the blame back on me with the ease of a magician performing a card trick. We told you this was a busy time of year. It is my graduation, I said. The fight was leaving me, draining out like water from a cracked cup. Graduations happen every year. Avery, my mother said. The line hit me like a physical slap. It was so dismissive, so casually cruel, that for a second, I couldn't breathe. Graduations happen every year, as if my 4 years of grinding, of working double shifts, of studying until my eyes burned, was just a recurring calendar event, like Arbor Day or a dental cleaning. Not my graduation, I said. Mine only happens once. Well, if you decide to go to grad school, there will be another one, my father said, laughing a little, as if he had made a clever joke. Look, Avery, don't make this into a drama. We have a lot on our plates. Colt is under a lot of pressure. He needs us right now. You have always been the independent one. You are tough. You understand. I understood. I understood that independent was just their code word for neglected. I understood that tough was just their excuse for never checking to see if I was hurting. I understood that in the economy of the Lewis family, my achievements were inflation adjusted to 0, while Colt's potential was valued at a premium. Okay, I whispered. Okay? My father asked, sounding relieved that the resistance had crumbled. Good girl. We knew you would get it. We will send you a card, and we will do that dinner, I promise. Yeah, I said. Okay, have fun at the party. It is going to be a blower, my father said, his enthusiasm returning instantly now that the annoyance of his daughter was dealt with. We got those spicy wings you like. Shame you won't be here. Yeah, I said. Shame. I hung up the phone. The silence in my apartment rushed back in, but it felt heavier now. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I could still hear the ghost of the sports commentary, the phantom cheers for a game that hadn't happened yet. They hadn't asked me a single question. They hadn't asked what my degree was in. They hadn't asked if I was nervous about the ceremony. They hadn't asked what job interviews I had lined up. They hadn't asked if I was happy. They had only asked for compliance. They had only checked to see if I would be easy, if I would fold up my needs and tuck them away so I wouldn't clutter up their living room while they built a shrine to my brother. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor. I walked over to the kitchen counter where a small pile of mail was sitting. On top was the receipt for my cap and gown rental. It was $85. I had paid for it with the cash I made from working the closing shift at the library on a Friday night. I looked at the receipt, and then I looked around my apartment. It wasn't much. Secondhand furniture, a rug I found on the curb, shelves full of books I had bought used. Everything in this room, every single object, I had paid for myself. My tuition, my rent, my food, my future. I had been funding my life like an only child. I had carried the weight of my own existence since I was 18 years old, waiting for the moment when they would notice how strong I had become. But looking at that receipt, hearing the echo of graduations happen every year in my head, the truth finally settled in my bones. I wasn't an only child. I was just the forgotten one. I picked up the receipt and crumpled it in my hand. It made a dry, crisp sound. I didn't throw it away. I smoothed it back out and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. I wanted to look at it. I wanted to remember this feeling. Because they were right about one thing. We would celebrate later, but it wasn't going to be the celebration they were expecting. I turned off the lights in the apartment, leaving myself in the dark. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the cold rage build in my chest, brick by brick, constructing a wall that no amount of apologies would ever be able to breach. To understand why the empty seats at graduation felt like a structural failure rather than just a disappointment, you have to rewind the tape. You have to go back 4 years, to a different kitchen table, in a different silence. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April. The sun was hitting the linoleum floor in that harsh, exposing way that highlights every crumb and scuff mark. I was sitting across from my parents, my hands resting on top of a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was my acceptance letter to the university. And not just an acceptance, it was a partial scholarship. It covered 40% of the tuition. To me, that 40% felt like a miracle. It felt like the world opening a door and inviting me in. I had calculated the remaining costs on a notepad that was sitting right there between us. I had broken it down by semester, by month, by week. I remember the look on my father's face. It wasn't pride. It was the look of a man trying to figure out how to tell a contractor that the renovations were over budget. "It is a great school, Avery," he said, tapping the table with his index finger. "Top tier, no one is disputing that. But," my mother added, the word landing heavy in the room, "but the numbers don't work," my father said. He pushed the notepad back toward me. "Even with the scholarship, you are looking at housing, meal plans, books, fees. It is too much of a stretch right now." "I can work," I said quickly. "I can get a job on campus. I can take out loans for the rest." "We make too much for you to get the good aid, but not enough to pay out of pocket," my father said, reciting the line like a rehearsed scripture of the middle class. "And we are not co-signing 6 figures of debt for a liberal arts degree. It is just not smart economics." Then came the pivot. The pivot was always the most painful part because it wasn't about lack of resources. It was about allocation of resources. "You have to understand the timing," my mother said, her voice softening into that reasonable tone that always made me feel unreasonable. "Colt is entering his sophomore year of high school. This is the critical window, if he is going to get recruited by the big programs. He needs the exposure now. The quarterback camps are not cheap," my father said, listing them off. "The travel team fees, the private coaching with that guy in the city who worked with the pros, the gear. We are talking about an investment that could pay for his entire college education later. A full ride. Avery, that is the goal." I looked at them. I looked at the acceptance letter. "So, because Colt might get a scholarship in 3 years, I can't go to college now?" I asked. "You can go to community college," my father said, shrugging. "Live here, save money. Transfer later. It is the sensible choice. It was a sensible choice. There is nothing wrong with it, but I knew, with a sickening clarity, that this wasn't about being sensible. This was about betting on the winning horse. I was the safe bet, the steady plow horse that would keep pulling the cart regardless of how it was treated. Colt was the racehorse. He got the premium feed, he got the heated stable, I got the field. No, I said. It was the first time I had ever really defied them on something this big. I am going. I worked for this. Then you are on your own, my father said. He didn't say it angrily. He said it casually, like he was telling me to pick up my own dry cleaning. If you walk out that door to that school, don't expect checks from us. Every dime goes into the Colt Fund. He actually called it the Colt Fund. I took the letter, I packed my bags, and for the next 4 years, I became a ghost in my own life. If my parents thought cutting me off would make me come crawling back, they underestimated how much fuel you can get from burning resentment. I became the independent one. That is the label families give to the child they don't have to worry about. The one they can neglect without guilt because she can handle it. I handled it, but the cost was physical. My life became a montage of gray dawns and fluorescent lights. For 4 years. My alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. I worked the opening shift at a coffee shop near the engineering quad because they paid an extra $1 an hour for the early start. I can still smell the burnt milk and stale espresso grounds in my hair. I spent 5 hours on my feet, dodging steam wands and difficult customers who screamed about oat milk before the sun was even up. Then I would run, literally run, across campus to my morning classes. I sat in the back of lecture halls, fighting to keep my eyes open, my hands shaking from too much caffeine and not enough food. I took notes with a ferocity that scared people. I wasn't there to socialize. I was there to extract every cent of value from the tuition I was bleeding to pay. In the afternoons, I worked in the admissions office, filing paperwork and answering phones. It was mindless, repetitive work, but it allowed me to sit down. I learned to eat my lunch, usually a peanut butter sandwich or instant noodles from the vending machine, in 4 minutes flat while the supervisor wasn't looking. In the evenings, I tutored. I taught freshman composition to athletes who looked just like my brother, boys who wore expensive sneakers and looked at me with bored, glazed eyes, knowing they would pass because the university needed them on the field. The irony was sharp enough to cut skin. I was helping these boys stay eligible to play the game that was consuming my family's resources, while I was counting pennies to buy laundry detergent. I lived in an apartment that was technically a converted attic. The ceiling was so low in the bedroom I couldn't stand up straight. The heat was spotty in the winter, and I slept in 3 layers of sweatpants. But I paid the rent, I paid the tuition, I paid for the textbooks, even the ones that cost $300 for a stack of paper. And while I was doing this, I watched the Colt Fund in action. I didn't have to guess where the money was going. I saw it. Sophomore year. I came home for Thanksgiving. I pulled my beat-up sedan, a car I had bought for $800 and prayed over every time I turned the key, into the driveway. And there it was, a brand new, lifted pickup truck, shiny black paint, chrome rims, leather interior. It is for safety, my mother told me later, while I was chopping onions in the kitchen. He has to drive to practice in the winter. We didn't want him in a small car on those icy roads. I drive a tin can on the highway every day, I said, the knife hitting the cutting board a little too hard. That is different, she said, waving her hand. You are a careful driver. Colt is, well, he is a boy. And the insurance was actually very reasonable. She didn't mention the monthly payments. She didn't mention the gas. She didn't mention that the truck cost more than my entire year of tuition. It wasn't just the truck. It was the private quarterback coach who charged $200 an hour. It was the travel leagues that required flights to Florida and Texas and California. It was the endless stream of new cleats, new helmets, new protein powders, new recovery tech. Every time I visited home, the ritual was the same. It was a play in 3 acts, and I was the stagehand. Act 1. The Arrival. I would walk in, exhausted, usually wearing the same clothes I had worn to class because I didn't have home clothes anymore. My parents would give me a quick hug, a distracted, "How is school?" and then immediately pivot to the television. Act 2. The highlight reel. The living room TV was always on, and if a game wasn't live, they were replaying Colts' game from Friday night. My father had a camcorder setup that rivaled a news station. "Watch this throw, Avery," he would say, rewinding the footage. "Look at the release. Look at the pocket presence. That is Division I material right there." I would watch. I would nod. "Good throw," I would say. "He is really developing." My mother would sigh, staring at the screen like it was a religious icon. The scout from state said he has the it factor. Act 3. The service. While they dissected the footage, the house needed to run. My mother would be too stressed or too busy hosting Colt's friends who were always there. So I became the staff. I washed the dishes. I refilled the chip bowls. I took out the trash bags full of soda cans and pizza boxes. I wiped down the counters. I was the invisible grease in the gears of the Lewis family machine. The machine was simple, really. I analyzed it like I analyzed the literature in my classes. My mother supplied the guilt. She was the emotional mortar that held the bricks together. She made sure everyone knew how much she sacrificed, how tired she was, how much she did for her boys. If you stepped out of line, she didn't yell. She just looked disappointed and sighed until you felt like a monster. My father supplied the authority. He was the architect. He decided what mattered and what didn't. He decided that football was the currency of our family, and he controlled the mint. His word was law, and his approval was the only sun the crops grew towards. Colt supplied the spotlight. He was the product. He just had to exist, to throw a ball, to smile, and the whole system justified itself. As long as Colt was successful, the money, the time, the neglect of everything else, it was all worth it. And I was the spare parts. I was the redundancy, useful to have around in case of emergency, but mostly just taking up storage space. The resentment didn't happen all at once. It was a slow accumulation, like silt at the bottom of a river. It built up when I had to decline a sorority bid because I couldn't afford the dues. It built up when I had to skip the spring break trip my friends took because I needed to work extra shifts to pay for my summer housing. It built up every time I looked at my bank account and saw a double-digit balance. But the real heartbreak, the quiet, gnawing thing that kept me up at night, wasn't about the money. By my junior year, I stopped wanting their money. I had proven I could survive without it. I had a strange, jagged pride in my poverty. I knew the value of $1 in a way Colt never would. I knew how to stretch a loaf of bread for a week. I knew how to fix a leaky sink because I couldn't afford a plumber. I didn't want their checkbook. I wanted their eyes. I wanted them to come to the honors ceremony where I received the department award. They didn't come. Colt had a scrimmage. I wanted them to read the essay I got published in the undergraduate journal. They said, "That's nice, honey," and put it in a drawer without opening it. I wanted them to witness my life. I wanted them to sit in a room for 2 hours, just 2 hours, and look at me. I wanted them to see that I was becoming a formidable woman, a scholar, a survivor. I wanted them to see that the daughter they had written off as a bad investment was actually the one yielding the highest returns. That was why I bought the graduation tickets. That was why I begged. It was the last desperate attempt to force them to look. But while my family was looking away, someone else started looking. It happened in the middle of my junior year. I was taking a seminar on advanced narrative structure with Dr. Elise Marrow. She was a legend in the department, a woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that could spot a lazy sentence from across the room. She didn't hand out A+. She barely handed out praise. I had turned in a paper on the concept of the unreliable narrator in modern tragedy. I had written it at 3 a.m. after a closing shift, my eyes blurring. She asked me to stay after class. I stood by her desk, clutching my backpack, expecting a lecture on my comma usage or a warning about my attendance. "This is angry," she said. tapping my paper. Her voice was calm, but sharp. I can rewrite it, I stammered. I can tone it down. No, she said. She looked up at me, really looked at me. It was a gaze so direct it felt invasive. Don't you dare tone it down. It is angry, but it is disciplined. You have a voice, Avery. It is buried under a lot of exhaustion, but it is there, and it is ferocious. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't ask why I looked so tired. She just treated me like a mind worth cultivating. She started pushing me. She gave me extra reading lists. She challenged my arguments in class. She recommended me for research assistant positions that actually paid decent money. For the first time in my life, an adult was looking at me and seeing potential. Not a burden. She was the one who told me about the fellowship. She was the one who handed me the application and said, "You are overqualified. Apply." And she was the one who gave me the envelope. That professor gave me the means to escape, but it was my grandmother, Nora, who gave me the permission. Nora saw it all. She saw the truck. She saw the empty seats at the awards. She saw me washing the dishes while Colt held court. She didn't say much in the moment. She knew my father's temper. But she would squeeze my hand when I brought her tea. She would slip a $20 bill into my pocket when no one was looking and whisper, "Get yourself a real dinner." She was watching the ledger too. And unlike me, she knew where the bodies were buried. As I stand here in the airport, thinking back on those 4 years of grinding poverty and invisibility, I realize that my parents made a fatal calculation error. They thought that by cutting me off, they were teaching me a lesson about the real world. They thought they were making me dependent on their approval. Instead, they taught me that I didn't need them. They forged me in the fire of their neglect. They stripped away every illusion I had about family loyalty until all that was left was the cold, hard truth of what I was worth to them. And once you know what you are worth, you stop accepting the discount. I look at the clock on the terminal wall. 30 minutes until boarding. The montage is over. The flashback is done. The exhausted girl who washed dishes and begged for attention is gone. The woman standing at the gate has a passport, a fellowship, and a secret that is about to blow the roof off the Lewis house. My parents wanted a return on their investment. They are about to get one, just not from the child they expected. The silence in my apartment after I hung up with my parents was heavy. But it was not empty. It was filled with the echoing vibration of my own insignificance. I sat there for a long time, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light coming through the window, trying to process the fact that I had just been bartered away for a tray of spicy wings and a football game. I needed to hear a human voice, not a voice that wanted to negotiate with me, or manage me, or explain to me why I was less important than a quarterback rating. I needed to hear a voice that recognized my name as something other than a burden. I picked up my phone again. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled past home and dad and mom to the end section. Nora Caldwell, my grandmother, my father's mother, the woman who had taught high school English for 40 years and who, at 78 years old, possessed a spine made of titanium and a vocabulary that could eviscerate you without ever raising its volume. She was the anomaly in the Lewis family tree, a woman who valued books over balls, silence over noise, and truth over comfort. I pressed call. It rang only once. "Avery," she answered. Her voice was immediate. There was no hesitation. No, "Who is this?" No distracted background noise of televisions or blaring radios. It was clear, sharp, and focused entirely on me. It was the auditory equivalent of a warm hand on my shoulder. "Hi, Grandma?" I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, to sound like the capable, independent adult I pretended to be, but the single syllable of her name made my throat tight. "I was wondering how long it would take you to call," she said. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was knowing. "I assume you have just spoken to the gruesome twosome." I let out a wet, shaky laugh. Only Nora could get away with calling my parents the gruesome twosome. "Yeah," I said. "I just got off the phone with them." And let me guess, Nora said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming crisp with disdain. They tried to sell you on the inevitability of the Super Bowl. They acted as if the National Football League had personally issued a subpoena requiring their presence in that living room. How did you know? I asked. Because your mother called me an hour ago, Nora said. She was doing her preemptive damage control tour. She wanted to make sure that if I spoke to you, I would reinforce the party line. She gave me a 10-minute speech about Colt's fragile mental state and the importance of family unity during this critical recruitment window. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the wall. Of course she had. My mother was a master of narrative control. She couldn't just neglect me. She had to recruit allies to validate the neglect. She needed Nora to agree that abandoning me was the only logical choice, so she could sleep at night without the nagging prick of conscience. What did you tell her? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was terrified of the answer. If Nora agreed with them, if Nora said, "Well, Avery, it is a big game," I think I would have crumbled into dust right there on the carpet. I told her, Nora said, enunciating every word with the precision of a woman who used to grade thesis papers, that they are making a mistake they cannot undo with a sheet cake later. I told her that memories have a very long shelf life, and that resentment preserves them perfectly. And I told her that if they think a football party is more important than their daughter's college graduation, then they do not deserve the daughter they have. The air in my lungs seemed to expand. For the first time in an hour, I could breathe. She didn't like that. I bet, I said. She told me I didn't understand the pressure Colt is under. Nora scoffed. As if I didn't raise 2 sons, as if I didn't bury a husband, as if I haven't lived through 8 decades of life. People like your parents use pressure as a synonym for inconvenience. They are not under pressure. Avery, they are under the delusion that the sun rises and sets in your brother's helmet. They aren't coming, I said. Saying it out loud to her made it real in a different way. It wasn't just a rejection anymore. It was a fact. They are really not coming. I know, Nora said. The sharpness in her voice softened, replaced by a deep, resonant warmth. But I am. I froze. Grandma, I said. It is a 3-hour drive, 4 with traffic. I have a car, she said, and I have a map, and I have a very loud audiobook of Middlemarch to keep me company. But your knees, I said. I knew that Nora had trouble walking for long periods. I knew that sitting in a car for 4 hours was agony for her hips. I knew she didn't like driving on the highway, especially not the interstate that led to the university, which was notorious for aggressive semi-trucks and construction delays. Grandma, you can't. It is too much. Do not tell me what I can and cannot do. Avery Lewis, she said firmly. I missed your high school graduation because I was in the hospital for that hip replacement, and I have not forgiven myself for it. I am not missing this one. I don't care if I have to drive 40 miles per hour in the slow lane with my hazards on. I don't care if I have to stop at every rest area between here and the campus. I will be there. You don't have to, I said, and to my horror, I started to cry. It was a confusing, messy kind of crying. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that my 78-year-old grandmother, who walked with a cane and winced when she stood up, was willing to navigate 4 hours of highway traffic to see me, while my healthy 45-year-old parents couldn't be bothered to drive 1 hour because they wanted to drink beer and eat wings. The contrast was so sharp it felt like a knife in my ribs. It highlighted just how little effort my parents were willing to make. It wasn't that the drive was too hard. It was that I wasn't worth the gas money. I am not doing it because I have to, Nora said, her voice cutting through my sniffles. I am doing it because I want to. I want to see you walk across that stage. I want to hear them call your name. You are the first woman in this family to get a university degree. Avery, do you understand the magnitude of that? Do you think I would miss that for a Super Bowl? I reserved 4 seats, I choked out. You can have all of them. You can put your purse in one, and your coat in the other, and your feet up on the third. Nora chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. I might just do that. I will expand to fill the vacuum they left behind. We fell silent for a moment. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, feeling the grit of the day washing away. Avery, Nora said. Her tone changed again. The warmth remained, but there was a new note in it, something investigative, intuitive. You sound different. Different how? I asked. You sound detached, she said. She was reading me. She was reading the tone of my voice like it was a line of poetry, analyzing the meter and the stress. Usually, when they pull a stunt like this, you sound hurt. You sound angry. You sound like you are trying to find a way to fix it. Today you sound calm. You sound like someone who has already packed mentally. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the empty suitcase standing in the corner of my room. I hadn't packed it yet. Not physically, but she was right, inside my head. I had already folded up my life in this town. I had already thrown away the emotional baggage of being the Lewis daughter. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. I couldn't tell her about the envelope doctor Marrow had hinted at, or the plan forming in the back of my mind to disappear from their radar completely. It was too fragile. If I spoke about it, I was afraid it would evaporate. I am just tired, Grandma, I said. I am tired of fighting for a seat at a table where I am not welcome. It is more than that, Nora said. She let the silence hang there, giving me space to fill it. But I didn't take the bait. I just want to get through the ceremony, I said. I just want to get the diploma. Nora didn't push. That was the beauty of Nora. She knew when to probe and when to wait. She respected the subtext. Listen to me, Avery, she said. Her voice took on that commanding quality she must have used when quieting a classroom of rowdy teenagers. You do not need their permission to be real. What? I asked. Your parents, she said. You have spent your entire life waiting for them to validate you. You think that if they don't see it, it didn't happen. You think that if they don't applaud, the performance doesn't count. You are wrong, she paused, letting the words sink in. You exist without them, she said fiercely. Your accomplishments are real whether Dale and Pam acknowledge them or not. Your intelligence is real. Your future is real. Do not let their blindness make you doubt your own sight. If a tree falls in the forest and your parents aren't there to hear it, it still makes a sound. Avery, it makes a damn loud sound. I know, I whispered, and for the first time, I think I actually believed it. I will be there, Nora repeated. I will be the witness, and I promise you, I will clap loud enough for 4 people. I will embarrass you. I will bring an air horn if I have to. I laughed. A real laugh this time. Please don't bring an air horn. The dean would have a heart attack. We will see, she said. I will leave early on Sunday. I will check the traffic reports. Don't you worry about me. You just worry about keeping that cap on your head. Thank you, Grandma, I said. I love you. I love you too, kid, she said. Now go get some sleep. You have a big life starting in a few days. You need to be rested for it. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone and sat there in the quiet apartment. The silence was still there, but the quality of it had changed. It wasn't oppressive anymore. It felt expectant. I thought about what she said. One witness. I had spent 23 years thinking that love was a numbers game. I thought that if I could just get the majority vote, my mom, my dad, my brother, then I would be elected as a valuable person. I thought that a crowded cheering section was the only proof of a life well lived. But Nora was driving 4 hours on bad knees to sit alone in a row of empty chairs. One person who actually saw me. One person who knew the difference between a graduation and a football game. One person who was willing to inconvenience herself because I mattered. It wasn't the crowd I had wanted. It wasn't the picture-perfect family tableau I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. But as I sat there, staring at the dust motes, I realized it was enough. One witness can be louder than 50 indifferent people. One truth can dismantle 1,000 lies. My parents were going to stay home. They were going to throw their party. They were going to pretend I didn't exist. Let them. I had Nora. And in a few days, I would have an envelope that I suspected would give me something even more dangerous than validation. I stood up and walked over to the suitcase in the corner. I unzipped it. The sound was loud in the quiet room, like a zipper tearing through the fabric of the life I was leaving behind. I wasn't just packing clothes. I was packing my identity. I was packing the Avery who begged. I was packing the Avery who waited, and I was leaving room for the Avery who was about to be born. I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I had bought at the thrift store for the ceremony. It was simple. Navy blue, professional. I held it up against myself in the mirror. My parents wouldn't see this dress. They wouldn't see me walk, but Nora would. "You don't need their permission to be real," I whispered to my reflection. The girl in the mirror looked back at me. She looked tired. She looked pale, but her eyes were steady. She looked like someone who was ready to be real. The summons came on a Tuesday, exactly 7 days before the ceremony. It appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Office, now." There was no greeting, no signature, and no explanation. There didn't need to be. When Dr. Elise Marrow summoned you, you did not ask questions. You simply adjusted your schedule, swallowed your anxiety, and went. I walked down the English department hallway, the floorboards creaking under my boots. The air smelled of old paper, dust, and the sharp, acidic tang of cheap coffee brewing in the faculty lounge. My heart was doing a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I ran a mental inventory of my recent work. Had I cited a source incorrectly? Was there a formatting error in my final thesis? Dr. Marrow was not known for social calls. She was a surgeon of the written word, and she usually only called you in when she needed to cut something out. Her office door was a heavy oak slab that looked like it belonged in a 19th century law firm. I knocked twice. "Enter," came the voice from inside. I pushed the door open. Dr. Marrow was sitting behind her desk, a massive structure buried under towers of books and manuscripts. She was a small woman, but she occupied space with the density of a collapsed star. Her silver hair was cut in a bob so sharp it looked like it could slice paper, and her glasses were perched on the end of her nose. She didn't look up when I walked in. She finished writing a sentence in a notebook, capped her fountain pen with a decisive click, and then finally raised her eyes. "Sit down, Avery," she said. I sat in the wooden chair opposite her. It was intentionally uncomfortable, designed to keep meetings short. "Is everything okay with my thesis?" I asked, unable to help myself. I double-checked the bibliography, but I know the citation software can sometimes glitch with the older journals. Dr. Marrow waved a hand dismissively. "Your thesis is fine. It is better than fine. It is the best piece of undergraduate criticism I have read in 10 years, but that is not why you are here." She opened a drawer in her desk. The sound of the wood sliding against wood was the only noise in the room. She pulled out an envelope. It wasn't a standard university envelope. It wasn't the thin white paper used for grade reports or administrative warnings. This envelope was thick. It was a rich, creamy color. Heavy stock that looked expensive. There was a logo embossed on the corner. A complex geometric crest I didn't recognize, pressed into the paper so deeply I could see the shadows of the ridges. She placed it on the desk between us. She didn't slide it toward me. She just let it sit there, a silent monolith. 6 months ago. "Doctor," Marrow said, her voice measured and calm. "I was contacted by a colleague of mine. He runs a program that does not advertise. They don't take applications in the traditional sense. They take nominations from a network of trusted academics. They look for specific traits, resilience, analytical depth, the ability to construct a narrative from fragmented truths." She looked at me, her eyes piercing. "I gave them your name." I stared at the envelope. "What is it?" I whispered. "Is it a grant?" "It is bigger than a grant," she said. "It is bigger than a campus award. It is an open door, Avery, but it comes with conditions." She finally slid the envelope across the mahogany surface. It stopped inches from my hand. "The first condition is timing," she said. "You are not to open this until after your graduation ceremony is concluded. Not the morning of, not during the speeches, after. Why? I asked. The request felt strange, almost theatrical. Doctor, Marrow hated theatrics. Because, she said, leaning forward slightly, what is inside this envelope requires a clear head. It requires you to be finished with one part of your life before you can agree to the next. If you open it now, you will be distracted. You will be weighing options when you should be walking across that stage. Is it bad news? I asked, my stomach flipping. No, she said. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, rare and fleeting. It is the opposite of bad news, but it is heavy news. It carries weight. I reached out and picked it up. The envelope felt substantial in my hand. It had a texture to it, like linen. I turned it over. It was sealed with a strip of wax tape. My name was typed on the front in a font that looked like it belonged on a diplomatic treaty. Avery Lewis. Promise me, she said. The command in her voice was absolute. I promise, I said. After the ceremony. Good. She sat back in her chair, the leather creaking. She looked at me for a long moment, and the sternness in her face softened into something that looked uncomfortably like pity, or perhaps pride mixed with concern. Avery, she said softly, I know about the seats. I froze. I hadn't told her. I hadn't told anyone except Nora. I don't know what you mean, I lied, my voice tight. I have been a department head for 20 years, she said. I see who requests extra tickets for grandparents and cousins, and I see who requests nothing, and I see who requests 4 tickets and then comes into my office looking like they are bracing for a hurricane. You are a terrible poker player. Miss Lewis. I looked down at the envelope in my lap, tracing the edge of the seal with my thumb. They are busy, I said, the automatic defense slipping out before I could stop it. It is a busy time of year. Don't, she said. It wasn't a scold. It was a correction. Don't do that. Not in this room. Out there. You can tell whatever polite fictions you need to survive. But in here, we deal in truth. That is what writers do. She took off her glasses and set them on the desk. Whatever happens on Sunday, she said, locking eyes with me. Whatever they do or do not do, it does not define you. Do you understand that? Their absence is not a reflection of your value. It is a reflection of their deficit. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It felt like swallowing a stone. I know, I said. Do you? She challenged. Because you are still carrying yourself like someone who is waiting for permission to exist. This envelope? She pointed to the document in my hands. That is not permission. That is an acknowledgement of what you already are. You earned it. No one gave it to you. No one bought it for you. You bled for it. She picked up her pen again, signaling the end of the meeting. Go home, Avery. Get your things, prepare for the ceremony, and keep that envelope sealed. Thank you, Dr. Marrow, I said. I stood up, clutching the envelope like it was fragile glass. Don't thank me, she said without looking up. Just don't waste it. I walked out of the office, the envelope burning a hole in my perception of the world. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my denim jacket, checking 3 times to make sure it was secure. I didn't know what it was. Graduate school? A fellowship? A job? But I knew that Dr. Marrow didn't deal in false hope. If she said it was an open door, then there was a way out. I needed that way out. I left the campus and walked to my car. I had one more task to complete before Sunday. I needed to go home, not to stay. I had made that clear to my parents, but to retrieve a single box of childhood belongings I had left in my closet. It had my journals, some photos, and a few first editions I had collected in high school. If I was really leaving, if I was really packing mentally, as Nora had said, I needed to clear out the last of my physical anchors. The drive to my parents' house took 45 minutes. It was a drive I had done hundreds of times. But today, the highway felt different. The familiar landmarks, the outlet mall, the giant car dealership, the water tower, looked like two-dimensional set pieces. I felt like an actor who had learned her lines and was just waiting for the director to call cut so she could walk off the stage. I turned onto the suburban street where I grew up. The lawns were manicured. The mailboxes were uniform. It was the picture of middle-class stability. And then I saw the house. It was impossible to miss. My parents hadn't just decorated for a party. They had branded the property. A massive banner was strung between the two oak trees in the front yard. It was made of vinyl, professionally printed. The kind of thing you order from a sign shop weeks in advance. It was bright green and silver, the team colors, and in letters 2 feet high. It screamed, Super Bowl Sunday, Lewis House Party. Below that, in slightly smaller text, Go Colt, Future Champion. I parked my car on the street because the driveway was already blocked by a delivery van unloading crates of soda and beer. I sat behind the wheel for a moment. Staring at the banner, it wasn't just a decoration, it was a statement of priority. It was a billboard announcing to the entire neighborhood what mattered in this house. My graduation wasn't even a footnote. There was no Congratulations Avery sign in the window. There were no balloons in my school colors. There was just the Super Bowl and Colt. I got out of the car. The air was cold. I walked up the driveway, past the delivery guy who was stacking cases of domestic light beer on a hand truck. He nodded at me. Big party, huh? Yeah, I said. Huge. I let myself in the front door. The house smelled of cleaning products and anticipation. The furniture in the living room had been rearranged to maximize the viewing angles for the three televisions that were set up. The main 60-inch screen was mounted on the wall, and 2 smaller screens were set up on folding tables on either side, presumably so no one would miss a single replay or statistic. Mom? Dad? I called out. Silence. The house was empty. A note on the kitchen counter in my mother's looping handwriting read, Gone to Costco for the meat platters. Back by 4. I felt a wave of relief. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to have the fake conversation where they asked how I was doing while checking their watches. I headed toward the stairs to go to my old room, but as I passed the entryway table, something stopped me. It is a habit, I suppose. The staff habit. I saw a stack of mail that had been dumped on the console table, slipping off the edge, and my instinct was to straighten it. My mother hated clutter. I reached out to stack the envelopes. They were the usual mix of junk mail, flyers for lawn care, and catalogs. But mixed in with the glossy advertisements were several window envelopes, official envelopes. I saw my father's name on a bank statement. I saw my mother's name on a utility bill. And then I saw my name, Avery Lewis. I froze. It was an envelope from a credit card company, not a pre-approved offer. I got those all the time at my apartment, usually offering me a free t-shirt if I signed up. This was different. This was a statement. It was thin. The way monthly bills are thin. I frowned. I didn't have a card with this bank. My only credit card was a student card with a $500 limit that I kept for emergencies and paid off religiously every month. I looked at the address. It was addressed to me. But at this house, I flipped through the rest of the stack. Another envelope. This one from a short-term lending agency. Avery Lewis. A third one, a collection notice from a medical supply company. Avery Lewis. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. A different rhythm than the anxiety I had felt in Dr. Marrow's office. This was colder. This was the slow, creeping dread of a horror movie when the protagonist realizes the call is coming from inside the house. Why was I getting bills sent here? I hadn't lived here in 4 years. I had changed my address with the post office the week I moved into the dorms. I held the credit card envelope up to the light, through the thin paper. I could see the faint outline of numbers, a balance. It wasn't 0. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Opening someone else's mail was a felony. Even if it was addressed to you but you suspected it wasn't yours. The legal ambiguity made my hands shake. But more than that, I was afraid of what I would see. I looked around the empty hallway. The giant banner outside cast a greenish shadow through the transom window, bathing the entry in a sickly light. Super Bowl Sunday. A thought, dark and terrible, bloomed in my mind. Colt's camps, the private coaching, the new truck, the constant refrain of, "We can't afford your tuition." I looked at the envelope again. The postmark was recent. 3 days ago. I took my phone out of my pocket and snapped a photo of the envelopes. I made sure the addresses and the sender names were clear. Then, with a trembling hand, I placed them back on the table, exactly where I had found them. I tucked them under the catalog so they looked undisturbed. I backed away from the table. I forgot about the box in my room. I forgot about the journals and the first editions. Suddenly, the only thing I wanted was to get out of this house. The air felt thick, suffocating. The Lewis House party wasn't just a celebration of football. It was a facade, and behind the facade, something was rotting. I turned and walked out the front door, past the delivery guy, who was now wheeling in a keg. "Have a good one," he said cheerfully. "You too," I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a minute, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I could feel the thick, cream-colored envelope from Doctor, marrow pressing against my ribs from inside my jacket. Whatever happens, it doesn't define you. I looked at the house one last time. The banner flapped in the wind. I put the car in reverse and backed out. I had come for a box of memories, but I was leaving with a crime scene photo. I didn't know the full extent of it yet. I wouldn't let myself do the math until I was safe. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just an invisible daughter. I was a resource, and resources are meant to be consumed. I drove away, leaving the party preparations behind, driving toward a graduation that no one in that house cared about, carrying 2 secrets in my pocket. One was a promise of a future I had earned. The other was a suspicion that they had already spent it. The alarm did not go off on graduation morning because I had been awake since 3 o'clock. I lay in the center of my mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. The silence in my apartment was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually signifies peace, but today, it felt like a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. I got out of bed at 6. The sun was just beginning to bruise the horizon with purple and gray. I made coffee. I drank it black because I had forgotten to buy milk, and I didn't have the energy to care. I showered and dressed slowly. My dress was navy blue, a sheath cut with a modest neckline. I had found it at a thrift store on the edge of town for $12. It had a small stain on the hem that I had scrubbed out with baking soda and vinegar until my knuckles were raw. It looked professional. It looked dignified. It looked like something a girl whose parents were proud of her would wear. I did my hair in the bathroom mirror. I pinned it back, securing the cap with bobby pins I had bought at the drugstore. I adjusted the tassel, left side, moved to the right later. My hands were shaking. I tried to steady them against the porcelain sink, but the tremor started in my shoulders and worked its way down. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was a physical manifestation of the aloneness. Usually, this is the part where a mother stands behind you in the mirror. She smooths your hair. She zips the dress that is hard to reach. She tears up and tells you she can't believe her baby is all grown up. I zipped my own dress. I smoothed my own hair. I looked at my own reflection and whispered, "You are fine. You are solid." I walked back into the main room and picked up my phone. I knew I shouldn't check it. I knew it was an act of emotional masochism. But hope is a muscle that twitches even when you sever the nerve. There were no notifications from Mom or Dad, no happy graduation gifts, no we love you texts. There was, however, one message. It was from Colt. It had been sent at 2:30 in the morning. Good luck. That was it. 2 words, lowercase, no punctuation, no emoji. It was the text of someone who had glanced at a calendar, realized they were supposed to say something, and sent the bare minimum before passing out or going back to their video game. It was a text sent during a commercial break. "Thanks, Colt," I whispered to the empty room. I grabbed my keys, my regalia, and the single ticket for the parking garage. I touched the inside pocket of my gown to make sure the thick, cream-colored envelope from Doctor. Marrow was still there. It was warm against my ribs. The drive to the stadium took 20 minutes. The traffic was heavy. I was surrounded by cars filled with families. I saw a minivan in the lane next to me with "Honk for the Graduate" painted on the back window in white shoe polish. I saw a dad driving a convertible with a girl in a cap and gown in the passenger seat. Both of them laughing. I kept my eyes on the bumper in front of me. I turned the radio up loud enough to drown out the sound of other people's joy. The stadium was a concrete bowl filled with noise. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of hot dogs and expensive perfume. I navigated the crowds, keeping my head down, dodging bouquets of roses and oversized balloons. I found my way to the designated student assembly area, but before I checked in, I had to go to the stands. I had to see them. I walked up the concrete steps to section 104. My heart was thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my sternum. Row G, seats 1 through 4. I stopped at the edge of the aisle. They were there, the 4 blue plastic seats. And taped to the backs were the white pieces of paper I had printed out in the library 3 days ago, reserved for the Lewis family. They were empty. Around them, the stadium was packed. Shoulders were brushing against shoulders. People were fighting for armrest space. But amidst the chaos of 10,000 people, those 4 seats were a pristine island of abandonment. I felt a sting behind my eyes, hot and sharp. I had known they weren't coming. They had told me. The banner in the yard had told me. The credit card bills in the hallway had told me. But seeing the physical void was different. It was the difference between hearing about a funeral and seeing the open grave. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down, expecting a miracle. Maybe my dad had changed his mind. Maybe my mom had felt a pang of guilt strong enough to put her in a car. It was a text from Nora. Accident on I-95. Jackknife tractor trailer. Traffic is at a dead standstill. We haven't moved in 40 minutes. I am 2 miles out. I'm going to walk if I have to. I am so sorry. Honey, I am trying. The ground seemed to tilt under my feet. Nora wasn't here. The one person, the only person, who had fought to be here, was trapped behind a wall of steel and rubber on the interstate. I stared at the screen. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't do this alone. I could handle my parents not being here because that was their choice. But Nora? Nora wanted to be here. If she missed it, if I walked across that stage to zero applause, to absolute silence. Hey, excuse me, are you Avery Lewis? I jumped. A student volunteer with a clipboard was standing next to me. Yes, I said, my voice cracking. We have been looking for you, she said, looking relieved. The dean wants to do a sound check. You are up 3rd in the program. Right? The speech? I had almost forgotten. 2 weeks ago, I had been selected to give the undergraduate address. I hadn't applied for it. The faculty committee had nominated me based on my thesis work and my resilience. It was an honor. It was supposed to be the highlight of my academic career. Now, it felt like a trap. I was going to have to stand up in front of 10,000 people and talk about the future, while my own past sat in traffic and my present was 4 empty chairs. I'm coming, I said. I looked at the text from Nora one last time. I am trying. I know, I whispered. I followed the volunteer down into the tunnels. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull roar above our heads. I lined up with the other speakers. I adjusted my hood. I touched the envelope in my pocket again. It was the only thing anchoring me to the earth. The ceremony began with a blast of brass instruments. We marched out onto the field. The sun was high now, baking the turf. I sat in the front row on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces. It was a blur of colors and movement. I tried not to look at section 104, but my eyes kept drifting there like a magnet. Still empty. The president spoke. The provost spoke. They talked about excellence. They talked about community. They talked about the unwavering support of families. And now, the dean announced, his voice booming over the loudspeakers, it is my privilege to introduce our student speaker, a young woman who exemplifies the spirit of inquiry and determination. Miss Avery Lewis. The applause was polite, scattered. I stood up. My legs felt like wood. I walked to the podium. The microphone looked like a weapon. I took a breath. It rattled in my chest. I looked out at the crowd. I saw parents holding up phones. I saw grandmothers with binoculars. I saw the collective weight of love and expectation that filled the stadium. And then I looked at Section 104, empty, and I looked at the tunnel entrance where the late arrivals would come in. Empty. I was alone. I opened my folder. I had written a speech about literary theory and the narrative arc of the college experience. It was smart. It was safe. But as I looked at those empty seats, the words on the page looked like lies. I didn't read them. They tell us that we stand on the shoulders of giants, I said. My voice echoed through the stadium, slightly delayed. They tell us that we are here because of the village that raised us. I paused. The silence in the stadium deepened. But some of us, I continued, my voice gaining a harder edge, did not have a village. Some of us built our own houses, brick by heavy brick, in the middle of the night. I saw the dean shift in his seat out of the corner of my eye. This wasn't the approved draft. I am speaking today to the students who worked the closing shift on Friday nights, I said. I am speaking to the students who bought their own textbooks instead of groceries. I am speaking to the ones who are sitting here today, scanning the crowd, looking for a face that isn't there. I gripped the sides of the podium. We are told that graduation is a shared victory, but for some of us, it is a solitary survival, and I want you to know, I said, my voice rising, pushing against the lump in my throat, that your victory is not less because it is lonely. It is more. You are the architects of your own lives. You are the ones who learned to clap for yourselves when the room was silent. The crowd was quiet. It wasn't the bored quiet of a commencement speech. It was the stunned quiet of people hearing something true. And then, I saw movement, way down in the lower tunnel. Near the handicapped entrance, a security guard was stepping aside. A woman was moving through the opening. She was moving fast, too fast for someone with a bad hip. She was using her cane like a piston. Her gray hair was wild, blown by the wind. She was wearing a floral dress and sensible sneakers. Nora. She stopped at the railing. She was breathless. Her chest was heaving. She was hundreds of feet away, but I could feel her presence like a shockwave. She looked up at the giant screen where my face was projected. She saw me. She dropped her cane. She didn't care. She raised both her hands in the air and she clapped. She clapped with a ferocity that defied her age. She was one woman in a tunnel, but she looked like an army. My voice broke, just a fracture. You are enough, I said into the microphone, looking directly at the tiny figure in the floral dress. You have always been enough. I stepped back from the podium. For a second. There was silence. And then, the students. The ones in the back rows. The ones with loans. The ones who looked tired. They stood up. It started as a ripple and turned into a wave. They cheered. I sat back down. My hands were shaking again. But this time, blood was flowing back into them. The rest of the ceremony passed in a fever dream. Names were called. Anderson, Brown, Clark. When they got to the L's, I stood up again. Avery Lewis. I walked across the stage. The dean handed me the diploma case. He looked at me with a strange expression, something between confusion and respect. Powerful speech, he murmured. Thank you, I said. I didn't look at the camera. I didn't look at the president. I looked at the tunnel. Nora had made it to a seat in the front row of the handicap section. She was standing up. She was crying. She was clapping so hard her hands must have stung. I looked past her, one last time, to section 104, still empty. My parents hadn't shown up at the last minute. The miracle hadn't happened. The Super Bowl party was in full swing. Colt was probably throwing a football in the backyard right now. I felt a final, clean break in my chest. The last tether was cut. I walked off the stage. I didn't go back to my seat. I kept walking. I walked past the marshals who tried to direct me back to the rows. I walked through the tunnel. I walked out into the blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I found my car. I unlocked it and threw my diploma into the passenger seat. And then I fell apart. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, and I howled. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was ugly, guttural, deep chest sobbing that made my ribs ache. I cried for the 4 empty seats. I cried for the $85 I spent on the gown. I cried for the little girl who used to wait by the window for her dad to come home. I cried for the exhaustion of the last 4 years. I cried until my throat was raw and my mascara was a black smear on my cheeks. I sat there for 10 minutes, gasping for air, letting the grief wash over me and recede. Then, silence returned. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my gown. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but they were clear. I reached into the inside pocket of the gown. I pulled out the envelope, the heavy cream-colored paper, the wax seal, the embossed logo. Do not open it until after your ceremony. The ceremony was over. I was graduated. I was done. I broke the seal. The sound of the paper tearing was loud in the quiet car. I pulled out the letter inside. It was a single sheet of heavy stationery. I unfolded it. My eyes scanned the header, the Westridge Global Research Fellowship. I read the first line. Dear Miss Pan, Lewis, it is our distinct honor to inform you. I read the second paragraph. Fully funded. I read the third paragraph. Kronemeyer University, Vienna, 2-year placement. I read the stipend amount. It was more money than I had made in the last 4 years combined. And then I saw the date. Acceptance required within 72 hours. Relocation support available immediately. I lowered the letter. I looked out the windshield at the asphalt shimmering in the heat. Vienna, Europe. A fully funded life, a career, a future that had nothing to do with football, nothing to do with debt, and nothing to do with the name Lewis. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was lighter than that. It was oxygen. It was freedom. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Hey, honey. Hope it went well. We are swamped here. Game starts soon. Call us next week? I looked at the text. I looked at the letter from Vienna. I didn't reply. I put the phone down. I picked up the letter again. I smoothed it out on the steering wheel. I wasn't going to call them next week. I wasn't going to call them ever. I started the car. The engine roared to life. I had a grandmother to meet in the parking lot. And then I had a passport to find. The graduation was over. The reckoning was about to begin. I left my car at the stadium. It sounds irrational, abandoning a vehicle I had worked 3 jobs to maintain. But when I tried to put the key in the ignition, my hands were vibrating so violently I couldn't find the slot. I was a hazard to myself and everyone else on the road. So I locked it, walked to the rideshare pickup zone, and collapsed into the back seat of a stranger's sedan. The driver was listening to a podcast about conspiracy theories, but I barely heard it. My entire world had narrowed down to the papers resting on my lap. I had broken the seal in the parking lot, but I hadn't really read it. I had only scanned the headlines. Now, in the quiet, air-conditioned interior of the car, I forced my eyes to focus on the fine print. It was real. The Westridge Global Research Fellowship. I read the terms, and my breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just an acceptance. It was a rescue mission disguised as an academic appointment. The letter detailed a fully funded position at Kronemeyer University in Vienna, Austria. It included a monthly living stipend of 2,800 euros. It included a housing allowance. It included comprehensive health insurance and a travel budget for archival research and conferences. I ran the numbers in my head. 2,800 euros a month. In my current life, I survived on $1,200 a month, and half of that went to rent. This was wealth. This was stability. Then I saw the paragraph at the bottom, bolded and underlined. This offer is time-sensitive. Due to the accelerated start date of the spring semester, we require a formal acceptance within 72 hours. Upon acceptance, the Fellowship Committee will release funds for immediate relocation support, including flight bookings and visa processing fees. 72 hours. 3 days. I had 3 days to decide if I was going to stay in a town that had erased me or move to a continent where no one knew my name. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't the hot, sticky heat of revenge that I had been nursing for weeks. It was cooler. It was cleaner. It felt like standing in front of an open freezer door on a humid day. It was freedom. I didn't want to scream at my parents anymore. I didn't want to make them hurt. I just wanted to be gone. I wanted to be so far away that their neglect couldn't reach me. "Miss, we are here." The driver's voice snapped me back. We were at the address I had given him, a 24-hour diner about 2 miles from the stadium. It was the only place I knew would be open and quiet enough to think. I saw Nora's car in the parking lot. It was parked crookedly across 2 spaces. I walked inside. The diner was mostly empty, just the smell of frying bacon and old coffee. Nora was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing an iced tea. She looked tired. Her floral dress was wrinkled, and her hair was windblown from the tunnel, but her eyes were alert. She stood up when she saw me. She didn't say anything. She just opened her arms, and I walked into them. We stood there for a long minute, hugging in the middle of a diner that smelled like grease. She felt frail against me, terrified bird bones held together by sheer willpower. But her grip was iron. "You did it," she whispered into my hair. "You walked." "I did," I said. I pulled back and wiped my eyes. "But look at this." I laid the envelope on the Formica table between the sugar packets and the ketchup bottle. Nora put on her reading glasses. She picked up the letter. She read it slowly, her lips moving slightly with the words. She read it once. She read it twice. Then she laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound of disbelief. "Vienna," she said. "My God, Avery, Vienna." "Is it real?" I asked. "It feels like a prank." "It is real," Nora said. Nora. She looked up at me, and the laughter vanished from her face, replaced by a look of deadly calm. It was the look of a general assessing the battlefield. "Doctor, Marrow didn't just give you a fellowship, she gave you a getaway car." "I have to tell them," I said, my reflex to seek approval still twitching like a severed nerve. "I have to tell Mom and Dad. Maybe this will make them see." "No," Nora said. Her voice was so sharp it made me jump. "You do not tell them," she said. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Avery, listen to me. This isn't a game. This is strategy. If you tell them you have a fully funded trip to Europe and a stipend, what do you think they will do?" I paused. I thought about the Colt Fund. I thought about the "we can't afford it" conversations. "They will find a reason why I can't go," I said slowly. "They will guilt you." Nora said, "They will say the family needs you. Or worse, they will try to get their hands on that relocation money. They will say Colt needs a new throwing coach or the roof needs fixing. And since you are rich now, you should help out." A chill went down my spine. She was right. I knew, with sickening certainty, that she was right. "Don't tell them yet," Nora repeated. "Secure the position, sign the papers, get your plane ticket, pack your bags. Tell them when you are standing at the departure gate. Or better yet, send them a postcard from Austria." "I need my passport," I said, my mind shifting into logistics mode. "It is at their house, in the box in my old closet." "Then we get it," Nora said. "But we are careful." I looked at the table, tracing the wood grain with my finger. "Grandma, there is something else." "What?" "When I went to the house earlier this week to get my books, I saw mail." Nora's eyes narrowed. "What kind of mail?" "Official mail," I said. "Credit card offers, loan statements." "But they weren't offers. They looked like bills, and they were addressed to me. Avery Lewis. But they were sent to their address." Nora's face went tight. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking very old and very scary. "I have suspected," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "I suspected it when Dale bought that truck 3 years ago. The math never added up. His commission checks aren't that big." "You think they—" I couldn't finish the sentence. It was too ugly. I think your father believes that because he feeds you, he owns you, Nora said bluntly. And I think he believes that your credit score is a family asset. She reached out and covered my hand with hers. We are going to fix this, Avery. But first, we secure your exit, prioritize the fellowship. The rest we deal with once you are safe. We spent the next hour in that booth. Turning the table into a command center, I used my phone to scan the acceptance form. I signed it digitally with a trembling finger. I hit send. Submission received. The confirmation email hit my inbox 3 seconds later. Next, I logged into the university portal. I drafted my resignation letter for my campus job. It was short, professional, and final, effective immediately. I wouldn't need the 2 weeks' pay. I had the relocation fund coming. I checked my passport status online. It was valid for another 6 years. I closed the browser tabs one by one. Resignation sent. Housing questionnaire filled out. Visa appointment requested. I was moving. I was moving with the speed of someone running from a fire. I need to go to the house, I said. Looking at the time, it was late afternoon. I need my passport, and I need to know what was in those envelopes. The game is on, Nora said, checking her watch. The Super Bowl started 20 minutes ago. They will be glued to the screen. They won't even notice you walking in. I will take a rideshare back to my car, then drive over, I said. It is better if I have my own vehicle. Call me the second you leave that house, Nora said. And Avery, if you find what I think you are going to find, don't confront them alone. Promise me. I promise, I said. I didn't go back to the stadium. I had the driver take me to my apartment first. I changed out of my graduation dress. I put on jeans and a hoodie. I wanted to be invisible. Then I took another car to the stadium lot, retrieved my sedan, and drove toward my parents' house. The neighborhood was quiet. Blue light flickered in the windows of almost every house, the universal glow of the Super Bowl. I pulled up to my parents' house. The driveway was full of cars, Colt's truck, my dad's SUV, and 3 or 4 other cars belonging to guests. The banner was still flapping in the yard. Lewis House Party. I parked down the street, in front of a neighbor's house. I didn't want to be blocked in. I walked up the driveway. I could hear the noise from inside, the roar of the crowd on the TV, the shouting of men, the high-pitched laugh of my mother. They were having a great time. They weren't missing me at all. I used my key to open the front door. The hallway was empty. Everyone was in the living room. I could hear my father's voice booming. Did you see that coverage? That is what you need to read. Colt, read the safety. I slipped my shoes off so I wouldn't make a sound. I moved like a ghost in the house I grew up in. I went straight to the kitchen. The mail had been moved. The entry table was clear, staged with a bowl of potpourri for the party. I scanned the kitchen. The counters were covered in platters of food, wings, nachos, sliders. But over by the fridge, there was a junk drawer where my mother shoved everything she didn't want to deal with. I opened it. It was a mess of rubber bands, batteries, and paper. I dug to the bottom. There they were. The stack of window envelopes I had seen earlier. They had been shoved under a takeout menu. I pulled them out. My hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't nerves. It was adrenaline. I took a credit card statement. Avery Lewis. I tore it open. I pulled out the summary page. Current balance, $4,350. I looked at the transaction history. Dick's Sporting Goods, $450. Elite QB Camp, Atlanta, $1,200. Delta Airlines, $380. Liquor Barn, $215. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just neglecting me. They were consuming me. They were using my name, my credit, my financial future, to fund a party for the son they actually loved. I opened the next one, a personal loan, $5,000. Purpose, education expenses. I let out a silent, ragged breath. Education expenses, but not mine. I took out my phone. I didn't just take a photo this time. I took a video. I flipped through the pages, documenting every transaction, every date, every lie. I shoved the envelopes into the pocket of my hoodie. I had come for my passport, but I had found my freedom. Because this wasn't just a betrayal. This was a crime, and crimes have consequences. I turned to leave, but then I heard footsteps coming from the living room. "I need another beer," Colt's voice said. I froze. I was standing in the kitchen. The evidence in my pocket. The truth burning a hole in my chest. I wasn't the daughter who begged anymore. I was the daughter who had the receipts, and I was about to set the whole house on fire. I managed to bluff my way out of the kitchen that night, when Colt stumbled in looking for a beer. I shoved the envelopes deep into my hoodie pocket and muttered something about looking for a bottle of water. He was too drunk on his own glory and domestic light beer to notice the tremor in my voice or the criminal evidence bulging against my hip. I walked out of the house during the third quarter of the Super Bowl, while my parents were screaming at a referee on the television screen. And I didn't look back, but I had to go back. 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning, I sat in my sedan 2 houses down, watching my parents' garage door open. My mother's SUV backed out, followed by my father. They were heading to the wholesale club. I knew their schedule. The post-party cleanup required industrial-sized trash bags and cleaning supplies. As soon as their taillights disappeared around the corner, I drove up. I wasn't breaking in. I still had my key. But as I unlocked the front door, it felt less like entering my childhood home and more like infiltrating a hostile foreign embassy. The house was quiet. The party debris had been mostly cleared. But the ghost of the celebration lingered. A deflated balloon in the corner. A stain on the rug. I moved through the hallway, and for the first time, I really looked at the walls. It was a museum, a shrine. Every surface was dedicated to the cult of Colt. There was Colt in his Pee-wee uniform, grinning with a missing tooth. Colt in middle school, holding a trophy. Colt in high school, mid-throw, framed in an expensive matte border. There were newspaper clippings laminated and hung like religious texts. There were shelves lined with game balls. I walked the length of the hallway. I looked for myself. I found one picture. It was a family portrait from 6 years ago. I was standing in the back row, half obscured by my father's shoulder, my smile tight and apologetic. That was it. I was a ghost in this house long before I moved out. I went straight to the kitchen. I needed the passport, but I also needed to know the full extent of the damage. The envelopes I had found during the party were just the surface debris. I needed to find the impact crater. I went to the drawer where my father kept important documents. It wasn't a safe. It was just a junk drawer near the fridge that he thought was secure because he covered the files with takeout menus and screwdrivers. I dug past the clutter. At the very back, beneath a manual for a blender we broke 10 years ago, I found a manila folder. It didn't have a label. I opened it on the counter. The first thing I saw was a document that made the air leave my lungs. It was a loan application for a training and development personal loan. $5,000. At the bottom of the page, there was a signature line for the cosigner, Avery Lewis. It was my name. But it wasn't my signature. The loops were too wide. The L was too aggressive. It was my mother's handwriting trying to be mine. I flipped through the rest of the folder. It was a timeline of theft. It started small, almost 3 years ago. A credit card opened in my name with a $500 limit. The statements showed small charges: gas, groceries, a dinner at a steakhouse. They had paid the minimums for a while, keeping it quiet. Then, the appetite grew. As Colt's needs expanded, so did the fraud. There were charges for the elite quarterback camp in Atlanta. $1,200. There were plane tickets. There were hotel rooms. There was a charge for custom orthotics. They had used my credit score, the pristine, empty credit score of a student who paid her library fines on time, to finance the Colt Lewis hype machine. I looked at the dates. The biggest charges coincided with the times they told me they couldn't afford to help me with textbooks. The weekend I was eating instant noodles in the dark because I was short on rent. They were charging a $400 dinner to a card with my name on it. My instinct was to scream. My instinct was to tear the folder in half, to throw the papers around the kitchen like confetti, to wait for them to come home and scream until the neighbors called the police, but I didn't. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Investigative realism, that was the phrase Dr. Marrow had used to describe my writing style. Detached, observational, cold. I needed to be a reporter in my own tragedy. I took out my phone. I didn't steal the documents. If I took them, they could claim I lost them, or that they never existed. I laid each page flat on the granite countertop. I took high-resolution photos. I made sure the dates, the amounts, and the forged signatures were legible. I photographed the envelopes. I photographed the account numbers. Then, I put everything back. I slid the papers into the folder. I put the folder back under the blender manual. I covered it with the takeout menus. I left the drawer exactly as I had found it. I wanted proof, not chaos. Not yet. Chaos gives the guilty room to improvise. I wanted them to feel safe until the trap snapped shut. I grabbed my passport from the box in my old closet, miraculously untouched, likely because it had no monetary value to them, and I left the house. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small, windowless office in the basement of the student union. Across from me sat a woman named Sarah, a legal aid advisor who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She was reviewing the photos on my phone. Her expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened. "This is identity theft, Avery," she said. Her voice was flat, professional. "It is textbook. Familial fraud is more common than you think. But the scale here, this is significant. How bad is it?" I asked. She typed something into her computer. "I can pull a soft credit inquiry since you signed the authorization. Let's look." She clicked the mouse. She sighed. "You have 4 credit cards open in your name that you didn't know about. 2 are maxed out. 1 is in collections, and there is that personal loan." "The score?" I asked, bracing myself. 540, she said. I felt nauseous. I had never missed a payment in my life. I was meticulous. And they had torched it. They had burned my financial reputation to keep Colt warm. "Can I fix it?" I asked. "I have a fellowship. I am moving to Europe. I can't have this following me." "You can fix it," Sarah said. She took off her glasses and looked at me. "But you need to understand what fixing it means. It is not just a matter of calling the bank and saying, 'It wasn't me.' What does it mean?" "It means you have to file a police report," she said. "You have to swear an affidavit that these debts were incurred fraudulently. You have to identify the perpetrators." "My parents," I said. "Yes," she said. "And once you file that report, the banks will go after them. This becomes a criminal matter. Fraud, forgery, grand larceny, given the amounts." I stared at the wall. I saw my father's face. I saw my mother's anxious smile. "Is there another way?" I asked weakly. "Can I just pay it off slowly? Close the accounts?" Sarah leaned forward. Her voice became very serious. "Avery, listen to me. This is $20,000 of debt. If you acknowledge it, if you make one payment, you are accepting liability. It becomes your debt. You will be paying for your brother's football camps for the next 10 years. You will be denied apartments. You will be denied car loans. You will be carrying their luggage while they walk free. If you don't contest this, it becomes your debt." The betrayal shifted in that moment. It stopped being emotional. It stopped being about empty seats at graduation or missed birthdays. It became structural. It became a chain they had forged around my ankles to make sure that even if I left, I would never really be free of them. "File the report," I said. My voice was cold. "Give me the forms." After the meeting, I drove to Nora's house. She was waiting for me on the porch. She took one look at my face and poured me a glass of lemonade that was mostly vodka. I told her everything. I showed her the photos. I told her the number. $20,000. Nora didn't gasp. She didn't look surprised. She looked vindicated. And then she looked incredibly sad. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew they were living beyond their means, but I didn't think they would eat their own young to do it." She stood up and walked to her antique desk. She unlocked a drawer with a small brass key. I have been keeping something too, she said. She pulled out a yellowed envelope. It smelled like cedar and old tobacco. This is from your grandfather, she said. He wrote it 3 weeks before he died. He knew I wouldn't be able to manage the finances alone. So he set up trusts, small ones, but specific. She handed me the letter. I read my grandfather's shaky handwriting. For Avery, to be given to her upon her 18th birthday. $5,000 for books, travel, or trouble. Use it to see the world. Little bird. He left checks, Nora said, her voice shaking with rage. He left a check for you, and a check for Colt, $5,000 each. I gave them to your father to deposit into custodial accounts because I was grieving and I trusted him. I looked up at her. I never got it. I asked your father about it when you turned 18. Nora said, He told me it was invested. He told me the market was down and he didn't want to pull it out yet. He lied. They spent it, I said. They spent my inheritance on Colt. They stole from a dead man, Nora corrected. And they stole from you. She sat down next to me. The rage in the room was palpable. It was a physical thing, heavy and electric. So, Nora said, what is the play? I am leaving, I said. My flight to Vienna is on Thursday, in 48 hours. Good, she said. And the parents? I was going to just leave, I said. I was going to disappear and let the police report do the talking, but I looked at the photos on my phone. I looked at the letter from my grandfather. But that is too quiet, I said. If I just leave, they will spin the story. They will tell everyone I ran away. They will tell everyone I am ungrateful. They will play the victim. They will rewrite the history. They are excellent fiction writers. Nora agreed. I won't let them, I said. I am not going to confront them in their living room where they can shout me down. I am not going to do it on the phone. Where then? Nora asked. You are having the family birthday dinner tomorrow night, I said. For Uncle Mike, everyone will be there. The aunts, the cousins, the neighbors. Nora smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Yes, I am. I will be there, I said, and I'm going to bring my exhibits. It will be a massacre, Nora said softly. No, I said. It will be a reckoning. I left Nora's house and drove to the library. I used a public computer to buy my plane ticket. The fellowship would reimburse me, but I needed to buy it myself. I used the last of my savings, money I had hidden in a hollowed-out book in my apartment, money they couldn't touch. I entered the credit card number. Confirm purchase, $1,200. It left me with almost nothing in the bank, but as the printer spit out the itinerary, I didn't feel poor. I felt dangerous. I held the paper in my hand. One way, Dulles to Vienna, Thursday night. I wasn't asking them for permission. I wasn't asking them for help, and I wasn't going to let them delay me with panic or fake tears or promises to pay me back when Colt goes pro. I had the evidence. I had the ticket, and tomorrow night, I was going to serve them both. The Wednesday night air was thick with humidity, and the smell of charcoal grills firing up all down the block. But inside my car, the air conditioning was blasting cold enough to preserve meat. I sat parked 3 houses down from my grandmother's place, watching the street fill up with cars. It was a family dinner, ostensibly. It was to celebrate Uncle Mike's 50th birthday, but in the Lewis family, birthdays were just pretexts for gathering an audience. My father's SUV was already there, taking up 2 spots. Colt's truck, the black behemoth bought with stolen credit, was parked on the lawn, crushing Nora's hydrangeas because he refused to walk an extra 20 feet. I looked at the digital clock on my dashboard. It was 5:30 in the evening. In 36 hours, I would be on a plane to Vienna. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the folder. It was a simple black presentation folder, the kind I used for term papers. Inside, it didn't contain an essay on Victorian literature. It contained high-resolution color prints of bank statements, loan applications with forged signatures, a police reporting form that was filled out but not yet filed, and the acceptance letter from the Westridge Global Research Fellowship. I checked my phone. I had a text from Nora. Door is unlocked. They are all here. Game time. I took a deep breath. I expected to feel afraid. For 23 years, the idea of confronting my parents had terrified me. I had spent my life trying to avoid their disapproval, shrinking myself to fit into the small, airless box they had designated for me. But as I stepped out of the car and smoothed down my shirt, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange, icy calm. It was the feeling of a surgeon scrubbing in. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to cut out the rot. I walked up the front path. Nora's house was a small, brick bungalow that always smelled like cinnamon and old books. Tonight, it was vibrating with noise. I could hear my father's booming laugh through the closed front door. I turned the knob and walked in. The living room was packed. There were at least 20 people squeezed into the space. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few neighbors who had been swept into the orbit of the Lewis family show. The air was warm and smelled of roasting meat and expensive perfume. My mother, Pam Lewis, was the first to see me. She was standing near the entryway, holding a tray of deviled eggs. She looked frantic. Her smile was too wide, her eyes darting around the room as if she were tracking invisible threats. She was wearing a new dress, something bright and floral that I knew cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Avery!" she shrieked, her voice pitching up 2 octaves. "You made it!" She rushed forward, balancing the eggs precariously, and tried to pull me into a one-armed hug. It was a performance. It was for the benefit of Aunt Linda and Cousin Sarah, who were watching from the sofa. "Hi, Mom," I said. I didn't hug her back. I stood stiff as a board until she retreated. "We were so worried you wouldn't come," she said, her voice lowering to a stage whisper. "After the confusion on Sunday, we missed you." Confusion was an interesting word for abandonment. "I am sure you did," I said. My voice was level, devoid of any inflection. "Well, you are here now," she said, beaming aggressively. "And guess what? I went over to the house and cleaned your room, changed the sheets, fluffed the pillows. It is all ready for you to move back in. I know the lease on your apartment is up soon, and we thought you could save money while you look for a job." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. She needed me back in that house. She needed me under her roof, where she could control the narrative, where she could intercept the mail, where she could keep me as a quiet, compliant co-signer. "I am not staying there," I said. The smile on her face faltered. "What? Don't be silly. Of course you are. Where else would you go?" "I am just here for dinner," I said. I adjusted the folder under my arm. "I am not moving back home. Not tonight. Not ever." Before she could process that, my father's voice cut through the room like a foghorn. "There she is. The graduate." Dale Lewis was holding court in the center of the room, a whiskey glass in one hand. He was wearing his party face, flushed, jovial, and radiating a toxic level of charisma. He strode over to me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Good to see you, kiddo," he said loudly, making sure Uncle Mike could hear. "We were just telling everyone how proud we are. Summa cum laude, right? Brains of the operation." He squeezed my shoulder. It was a warning squeeze. Play along. "It was a nice ceremony," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Shame you missed it." He didn't blink. He just laughed, a booming sound that sucked the tension out of the air for everyone but me. "You know how it is," he said, turning to the room. "Traffic on the interstate was a nightmare. We tried. Folks, we really tried. But hey, she got the paper, right? That is what matters." He turned back to me, his eyes hard. "Go say hi to your brother. He has got big news." I walked past him. I moved through the crowded room like I was made of glass. I nodded to my cousins. I said hello to the neighbors. I felt like a spy in enemy territory. Colt was sitting in Nora's favorite armchair, his legs sprawled out, taking up as much space as physically possible. He was surrounded by 2 of my male cousins who were listening to him with rapt attention. Colt looked like a prince. He was wearing a polo shirt that fit tight across his chest, and he had a fresh haircut. He looked expensive, and I knew exactly who had paid for it. "So this scout," Colt was saying, gesturing with a beer bottle. "He comes up to me at the party, right? And he says, 'Lewis, I have seen tape, but I needed to see the character, and because the party was so pro-level, the banner, the setup, he tells me, you have got a support system. That matters to the recruiters.'" He took a swig of beer. "That connection is going to change everything," he said. "We are talking full ride. We are talking NIL deals." He looked up and saw me standing there. "Hey, Avery," he said. "Did you hear? The party was a massive hit. You should have been there." "I was at my graduation," I said. Right, he said, waving a hand. "But I mean, for the networking. Dad says this might be the ticket. All that money they put into the setup? Worth every penny." "I am sure it was," I said. I looked at his new watch. I looked at the shoes he was wearing. "It is amazing what you can buy when you don't worry about the cost." Colt frowned. He wasn't used to me pushing back. Usually, I was the cheerleader. Usually, I was the one nodding and saying, "Wow, Colt, that is great." "What is with you?" he asked, his voice dropping. "You look intense." "I am just listening," I said. "I am just taking it all in." I walked away before he could ask anything else. I found a spot in the corner of the dining room, near the china cabinet. From here, I had a view of the entire room. I saw Nora. She was in the kitchen, organizing the dessert plates. She caught my eye through the doorway. She didn't smile. She just gave me a single, sharp nod. "Hold the line." "Avery!" It was Aunt Linda. She was a kind woman, but she had the observation skills of a brick wall. She bustled over to me, holding a glass of wine. "Honey, I am so sorry I missed the graduation," she said. "We were out of town. How was it? Did you give a speech or something? I thought I heard Nora say you gave a speech." "I did," I said. "I was the student speaker." "Oh my goodness!" Linda clapped her hands. "Dale, Pam, did you hear that? Avery gave the speech." My mother materialized out of nowhere. She moved with the speed of a panic attack. "Oh, it was just a little thing," Pam said quickly, stepping between me and Linda. "Just a few words to the department. Very low key." She shot me a look. "Shut up." "Actually," I said, stepping around her. "It was the university address. To the entire stadium. 10,000 people." Linda's eyes went wide. 10,000? Dale? You didn't tell us that." My father laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Well, you know Avery. She likes to be dramatic. It was a nice speech. We are very proud." "So what is next?" Cousin Sarah asked, joining the circle. "Grad school? A job?" "She is job hunting," my mother interrupted, her voice loud and shrill. "She is going to take the summer off, move back home, and just look for the right fit. No rush. We want her to settle down and help Colt with his summer training schedule. He needs someone to drive him to the sessions." I felt the blood humming in my ears. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my future. They had it all mapped out. I would move back into my childhood room. I would drive Colt to the camps I had unknowingly paid for. I would use my degree to write his college essays. I would be the servant, the bank account, and the ghost, all wrapped in one obedient package. I smiled. It was a razor-blade smile. "Is that the plan?" I asked softly. "Of course it is," my father said, clapping his hands together. "Team effort. The Lewis family wins together." "Actually," I started. Nora dropped a stack of plates in the kitchen. The crash was deafening. The room went silent. "Slippery fingers," Nora called out. "Everyone, come sit down. Cake time." The tension broke, but not for me. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Not yet. Nora was right. Not yet. We moved to the table. It was a tight squeeze. I ended up seated between Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda. My parents were across from me. flanking Colt like bodyguards. The lights were dimmed, the cake was brought out. A massive chocolate sheet cake with 50 candles blazing. The heat from the flames made the air shimmy. Everyone sang happy birthday. My father sang the loudest, his baritone filling the room. My mother clapped out of time. Colt looked bored, checking his phone under the table. I looked at the flames. I thought about the bridge I was about to burn. Uncle Mike blew out the candles. The smoke drifted up, acrid and gray. The lights were flipped back on, blindingly bright. "Speech! Speech!" someone yelled. Uncle Mike stood up, mumbled a few thanks, and sat back down. He was a man of few words. Then, Nora stood up. She didn't need to shout. She just stood at the head of the table, her hands resting on the lace tablecloth. She looked at the room with the authority of a matriarch who had buried the bodies and knew where the shovels were kept. "I have something to say," she said. The room quieted down. People put down their forks. "We spend a lot of time in this family talking about potential," Nora said. Her eyes flicked briefly to Colt, then moved on. "We talk about what is coming next. We talk about the big game. But tonight, I want to talk about what has already been achieved." She paused. The silence was heavy. My father looked confused. My mother looked nervous. "I want to hear good news," Nora said. "Real news, not projections, not hopes, truth." She turned her head slowly, her gaze locked onto me. It was a command. "Start with my granddaughter," Nora said. "Avery, I believe you have something to tell the family." All eyes turned to me. My father leaned back, looking bored. "Go ahead, honey. Tell them about the job hunt," my mother smiled anxiously. "Or about the move home." I stood up. I picked up the black folder from the floor and placed it on the table. It made a solid, heavy sound. I looked at my parents. I looked at the brother who had consumed my inheritance. I looked at the aunts and uncles who had watched me become invisible for 2 decades. "I am not job hunting," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the girl who had spoken to 10,000 people. "And I am not moving home. Avery, don't be difficult," my mother hissed. "I am moving to Vienna," I said. The room blinked. "Vienna? Virginia?" Aunt Linda asked. "Vienna, Austria," I said. "I have been awarded the Westridge Global Research Fellowship. It is fully funded. It includes a full salary, housing, and travel. I leave on Thursday." The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face went slack. The charm dropped off him like a mask slipping. "Austria?" he said. "You can't go to Austria. Who is going to help with the house? Who is going to—" "And," I continued, cutting him off. I opened the folder. "There is one other thing." I pulled out the first photo. It was the picture of the credit card statement with the $4,000 balance for Colt's training. "I found these," I said. Nora sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. The execution had begun. I held the letter from the Westridge Global Research Fellowship in my hands. The paper was heavy, a physical anchor in a room that suddenly felt like it was spinning on a tilted axis. My heart was beating a steady, rhythmic tattoo against my ribs, but my hands were rock steady. "I am moving to Vienna," I repeated, my voice carrying to the back corners of the room where my cousins were standing with their mouths slightly open. "I have been selected for a fully funded research fellowship. It covers everything: housing, travel, and a monthly stipend of 2,800 euros. The room reacted in waves. First, there was silence, the stunned, breathless kind that follows a car crash. Then, there was a ripple of movement. Aunt Linda put her wine glass down, her eyes wide with genuine admiration. "Vienna?" she breathed. "Oh, Avery, that is incredible. That is the opportunity of a lifetime." "It is," I said, looking directly at my mother. "It is the kind of opportunity you don't turn down to drive someone to football practice." My mother's face had gone the color of unbaked dough. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin this, to find a way to make my success sound like a betrayal. But she couldn't find the words. My father found them for her. "Now hold on," Dale Lewis boomed. Standing up, his face was flushing a dark, angry red. "This is a big decision, Avery. You can't just announce you are leaving the country in front of everyone without discussing it with your family first. We have plans. We have logistics. I don't have plans with you," I said calmly. "I have a contract with a university." "But who is going to—" he started, looking helplessly at Colt. "Tell them—" Nora's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. She was still standing at the head of the table, looking like a judge presiding over a sentencing hearing. She didn't look at my father. She looked at me. "Tell them when you learned this, Avery." I took a breath. This was the first pivot. "I found out on graduation day," I said. I opened the envelope in the parking lot of the stadium. Alone. I let the word hang there. Alone. "I opened it right after the ceremony," I continued, turning to look at my aunts and uncles. "The ceremony where I was the speaker. The ceremony where I looked for my family in the stands and saw 4 empty seats because my parents decided that a Super Bowl party was more important than watching me graduate." The energy in the room flipped instantly. 5 minutes ago, the Lewis House party had been a funny story, a testament to my father's love for football. Now, in the harsh light of my abandonment, it looked cruel. It looked petty. Heads turned toward Pam and Dale. Aunt Linda looked at my mother with a mixture of confusion and judgment. "You didn't go?" Linda asked, her voice sharp. "I thought you said there was an emergency. I thought you said the car broke down." It was complicated," my mother stammered. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a high-pitched squeak. "We had guests coming. The caterers were early. You know how stressful hosting is. Linda, we couldn't just leave 40 people on the lawn." "Complicated is a lazy word for choosing wrong," Nora said. Her voice was low, but it silenced the room. "You chose wings and beer over your daughter's summa cum laude degree," Nora said. "Don't call it complicated. Pam, call it what it was. Neglect." My father looked like he was about to explode. "Now listen here, Mom," he started, pointing a finger at Nora. "You don't know the half of it. We sacrifice everything for these kids. Everything." "You sacrifice one kid for the other," I said. I reached for the folder again. "And that brings me to the second piece of news," I said. I opened the folder. I took out the photos of the bank statements and the loan application. I fanned them out on the white tablecloth, right next to the birthday cake. "I didn't just find a job this week," I said. "I found a ledger." I picked up the photo of the credit card statement. "This is a credit card bill," I said, holding it up so Uncle Mike could see. "It is in my name, Avery Lewis, but I didn't open it. And I certainly didn't spend $4,350 at Dick's Sporting Goods and the elite quarterback camp in Atlanta." Colt's head snapped up. He had been looking at his phone, trying to disappear. But the mention of the camp pulled him back in. "And this," I said, holding up the loan document, "is a personal loan for $5,000 for educational expenses. It lists me as the cosigner, but that is not my signature." I looked at my mother. She was shaking her head frantically, her eyes pleading with me to stop. "Avery, please," she whispered. "Not here. We can talk about this." "We are talking about it," I said. "We are talking about it right now." I turned to my cousin Rob. He was a 30-year-old actuary who worked in downtown Chicago. He knew money. He knew debt. "Rob," I said, sliding the photo of the loan document toward him, "do you recognize that lender name?" Rob looked at the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He frowned. "Yeah," he said, his voice serious. "That is a subprime lender. They target people with bad credit or desperate situations. The interest rates are usually around 25%. That is a predatory loan. Avery, 25%, I repeated. And it is in my name. My credit score is 540 because of this. They torched my financial future to buy shoulder pads. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was fraud. This was a crime. My father slumped in his chair. He looked suddenly smaller, like the air had been let out of him. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that his authority didn't extend to the penal code. You ungrateful girl," he whispered. But there was no heat in it. "We did what we had to do. Colt needed the gear. He is going to make millions. We were going to pay you back." "When?" I asked. "When he goes pro?" "What if he doesn't? What if he blows out a knee next week? I would be stuck with $20,000 of debt and a ruined name." "I didn't know." The voice came from the other side of the table. It was Colt. He was staring at the papers on the table. He looked at the receipt for the camp he had bragged about, the camp where he said he had been invited because of his talent. "Dad," Colt said, his voice cracking, "you told me I got a scholarship for that camp. You told me the equipment was sponsored. We didn't want you to worry about money," my mother said, reaching for his hand. "We wanted you to focus on the game." Colt pulled his hand away. He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he didn't look at me like I was a piece of furniture. He looked at me like I was a victim of the same lie that had built him up. "You put it in her name?" Colt asked. "You stole from Avery to pay for my cleats?" "It is all the same family pot," my father yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "It doesn't matter whose name is on the paper. We rise together." "No," Nora said. "You sink together. Avery is the only one rising." Nora reached into her purse. She pulled out the yellowed envelope, the final nail in the coffin. "And speaking of the family pot," Nora said, her voice deadly calm, "let's talk about the $5,000 your father left for Avery, the education fund." She threw the letter onto the table. It landed on top of the credit card statements. "He stole that too," Nora announced to the room. "My husband left checks for his grandchildren. Avery never saw a dime of hers. Dale told me it was invested, but looking at these credit card bills, I think we all know where it went." She looked at her son, my father, with a look of pure, distilled disappointment. "I have already met with an attorney. Dale," Nora said, "we are filing a forensic accounting request on the estate. And we are filing a police report regarding Avery's identity theft. If you want to stay out of jail, you are going to start selling things. You are going to sell that truck. You are going to sell the boat. And you are going to pay off every single cent of debt you put in this girl's name." My father's face went gray. "Mom, you wouldn't. I am your son." "And she is my granddaughter," Nora said. "And unlike you, she didn't steal from me." It was done. The truth was out. It lay on the table between the birthday cake and the wine glasses, ugly and undeniable. I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. It was the weight of 23 years of silence. I reached into my pocket and pulled out one last piece of paper. It was my itinerary. "I am leaving," I said. "My flight departs from Dulles in 36 hours. I am taking a rideshare to the airport. I am not asking you for a ride." I looked at my mother. She was crying now. Ugly. Terrified sobs into her napkin. "I am not paying for your choices anymore," I said. "I am not co-signing your loans. I am not driving Colt to practice. I am not living in my childhood room to save you money." I looked at Colt. "I hope you make it." "Colt," I said, "I really do. But you need to grow up. You need to realize that the world isn't a stadium cheering for you. Sometimes, it is just a sister paying your bills." I looked at Nora. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled. "Go. I will handle the cleanup." I turned to my parents one last time. They looked shattered. They looked like people who had gambled everything on a single number and watched the wheel land on zero. "I am not angry," I said, and I meant it. Anger implies that I still care what they think. Anger implies that I want them to fix it. "I am done." I turned around and walked out of the dining room. I walked through the living room. I opened the front door and stepped out into the humid night air. I didn't look back. I heard my mother calling my name, a faint, desperate wail, but I kept walking. I walked to my car. I got in. I started the engine. 2 days later, I stood at the gate at the international terminal. I was alone. There were no parents waving goodbye. There was no brother giving me a high five, but I wasn't lonely. I had a backpack on my shoulders. I had a passport in my hand. I had a bank account that was mine, and a future that belonged to no one but me. I boarded the plane. I found my seat. Window. Row 22. As the plane taxied down the runway, I watched the lights of the city blur past. Somewhere down there, in the suburbs, my parents were dealing with lawyers and forensic accountants. Somewhere down there, Colt was realizing that his golden road was paved with stolen money. But up here, the air was clear. The plane lifted off. The force of gravity pressed me back into my seat. I watched the ground fall away. I watched the houses turn into specks of light, then disappear entirely into the darkness. I closed my eyes and smiled. I had finally graduated. Thank you so much for listening to Avery's story. It is a long road to walk from betrayal to freedom, but sometimes the only way to find yourself is to leave everything else behind. I would love to know where you are listening from. Are you tuning in from a busy city, a quiet room, or maybe on a journey of your own? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lucy Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so we can get this story out to more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember, you don't need permission to be real.